Hi everyone, this is Nick Wilson here with the Satori Alliance. Hey, I was having a conversation with Renchi Nancy Walzog over the weekend about conversations with kids and their parents when they don't pass their stripe, tip test, belt test, whatever it may be, and how difficult that conversation can go depending on the reaction from the child or the reaction from the parents, and how it really it takes a lot of practice to have those conversations. So just want to give you a few tips for those of you out there that are newer instructors or have a difficult time with those conversations to set you up for success. So here's a couple things that I see two things. Number one, if you're not very good at these conversations, instructors will either number one avoid having them all together and feeling like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and pass this student anyway because this conversation is too difficult to have. Or number two, they fail the student without having proper communication with either the student or the student's parents. They leave the school disgruntled and they either end up quitting eventually or they quit. So the goal here is to try to find that middle ground where you have good communication with the child, with the parents. And I've found that sometimes, even though these conversations can be really difficult, that it actually brings me closer to the student and to the parent, them knowing that I'm going to have high standards for them and that I really care about them enough to fail them, basically, and say, you know what, I know you can do better next time. So here's a couple things to think about is when a student is starting, they're brand new in their martial arts training, there's a lot of hand holding. You're going to be doing a lot of the work for them, in essence, as far as their repetitions in class. You're going to be doing it with them. And then during their path as a martial artist, hopefully by the time they get a black belt, they have what we call Hattori Gecko. Hattori Gecko is the ability to practice on your own, right? So they're self-disciplined enough where they're practicing on their own without necessarily your assistance right there next to them. But again, that's a gradual process from the beginning of their training all the way through black belt and beyond, that the goal is to give them more and more ownership of their own training and really establish that self-discipline. So I want to give you a few kind of practical examples of how I like to run class in order to really set you up for success, to have those conversations, because a lot of it is time management and resource management with your instructor team. So for our schools, we have 5 week cycles, and at the end of each 5 weeks, the students will test on the specific curriculum that they're working towards in order to get a stripe on their belt. And we do a rotating curriculum. But whatever type of curriculum structure you have at your school, you can find a way to kind of work this in. And let's say our junior class is 45 minutes, and it happens to be week 5, and it's testing day. Hopefully, by that day, the students have their material down well enough to test. And any amount of practice at that point is just kind of extra credit or gravy, and hopefully that they're good to go at that point. So what I like to do is, as soon as class starts, I'm not even going to do a real long warm up, maybe a 5 minute warm up, and then I'm going to get right into reviewing their curriculum as soon as possible, a quick run through, and by the 10-minute mark of class, I'm beginning their test. And then hopefully in another 10 minutes, so that would be 20 minutes into class, I'm done with testing and I've tested everyone. Now let's just say, for the sake of this example, that there's 15 kids in class and two of them I didn't think that they were ready to earn their stripe that day. Now, in an ideal situation, I would have approached it with the students and the students' parents before testing day, right? So maybe it's week 3, week 4, and I'm having that discussion then. But again, this is almost like worst case scenario. It's week 5, and the student either bombed, they completely forgot everything, or they had really low effort, or they had a really bad attitude, whatever it may be, okay? So, again, going back to this scenario, 10 minutes of quick review, and then 10 minutes of testing. That 20-minute mark, I'm done with testing. At that point, I will have either an assistant instructor or another instructor take the whole class for some type of drill. Maybe it's a bag work drill, maybe it's some attribute training, maybe they're going to be doing some fitness, some push-ups, jumping jacks, that sort of thing. During that time, um, I'm going to be pulling out those two students at one at a time and having that conversation with them. And the conversation might sound something like this. So, Johnny, hey, I want to let you know, your side kicks looked really nice today, and even your self-defense techniques looked pretty good. One thing I noticed is during class, you weren't super focused. Okay, so how do you feel like you did on your focus? So from level 1 to level 10, 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest focus wise, where do you feel like you lined up? And most students are a lot harder on themselves than you would be, and they'll say, "Oh, I was a 3." And I'll say, "You know what, Johnny, I don't think you were a 3. I think that you were probably a 6 or a 7. And I've seen you more focused in the past. But because it's testing today, I really want to see your best. And so I'm going to give you another chance next week. But next week, I want to see you at an 8 or a 9 for sure, okay? And I know you can do it. So again, your sidekicks looked really nice. Your self-defense techniques looked really nice. But again, I really need to see that focus, especially on testing day. So do you think you can do that for me, Johnny? Yes, sir? Great. So next week, I'm going to test you again next Thursday, okay? All right, well, let's go tell mom what the plan is, and so she knows. And then I'm going to walk Johnny off the mat. We're going to have that same conversation with mom. So, Mrs. Smith, hey, I just want to let you know I was taking a look at Johnny today, and his sidekicks looked really nice. His self-defense moves looked really nice. But I noticed his focus was a little bit off today, and I know he can do a little bit better. We both agreed that he can do better, and next week we're going to go ahead and retest him again and see how he does. So, how does that sound, Johnny? Sound good? Awesome. So that's an example of if it was like a focus issue. If it was an issue where the student just maybe didn't have the curriculum down well enough, hopefully I'm having that conversation earlier in the cycle. So it's not on week 5, but it's more on week 3 or week 4. Okay, but let's just say it is week 5, and for whatever reason the student isn't ready. Okay, so I'm gonna again pull that student out, and I'm gonna say, Johnny, uh, here's what I see. You're in class. You've always got a great attitude, and I really appreciate that. You've always got awesome respect. I feel like we could get our kata down a little bit better before we're ready for our tip. What do you think? Do you think you could get it down a little bit better? Yes, sir. Okay, so here's what we're going to do is I'm not going to give you your tip today, but we're going to retest for it next week, or let's say it's 2 weeks, or let's say it's a month, whatever you really think is doable. And I want to set you up for success. So you tell me, Johnny, what do you think what are some things that you can do to make sure that you're ready for your tip next time we go for this? And I'm really trying to get them to think of those answers again, rather than spoon feeding those answers to them. I'm trying to get them to think about, okay, what do I do, right? And so they're going to hopefully come up with answers of, I can come to extra classes, right? Instead of 2 classes a week, I'm going to come to 4 classes the next week, okay? I'm going to practice at home, and I'm going to ask for some extra help from an instructor either before or after class. And so if they do those 3 things, if they just do one of them, they're going to be setting themselves up for success. But if they do all 3, man, they're gonna knock it out of the park. So again, as soon as I have that conversation with Johnny, again, I'm walking over to mom or dad or grandma and grandpa, and I'm explaining that here's the game plan: is I really want your child. I want to have that standard be high for your child. Here's the extra things that we need to do to, again, set them up for success. Extra classes, making sure they're practicing at home, we'll give them a little extra one-on-one time and make sure they're good to go. And like I said at the beginning, oftentimes when I have this conversation with kids and parents, the first time it's usually the hardest. And then anytime I need to have that conversation later on down the road at other, later belts, it's usually a lot easier because the kids are accustomed to it. And it's like, you know what, I'm not always going to get everything the first time. And, my sensei thinks I need a little extra work. I know I'll be ready. I know I can take care of it. And again, it really sets them up for not always achieving it the first time, but having to push through those barriers. So again, that's how we'll do it for a stripe test or a tip test. And then Renchi, Nancy Walzog, and I, we also talked about getting students ready for their junior black belt test. So you have students that are preparing for this enormous test. And at our school, they have to know everything from white all the way through black, all their techniques, everything. So, it's usually a 3 to 4 month, sometimes up to 6 month preparation class or cycle that they have to go through. And how we'll work it is before we actually send students to that black belt test is we'll have what we call a fog test. And the fog test is really designed to let that family know, that student and their parents know, okay, if today was your actual black belt test, this is how you would do. And we'll get our grading sheet out and we'll grade them. Okay, these areas you passed, these areas you kind of maybe passed, you fumbled a little bit, and these areas you got a no pass. That's either you did the wrong move or you completely blanked out. And then I'll have it written. I will give them a copy and send them home with that copy. But again, that conversation is a little different in the sense that there's a lot kind of on the line for that family. They're thinking, okay, my child is going to test this December. We've been waiting for several months for this, and you're going to have to be the bearer of bad news. So how I'll have that conversation with that family is, hey, listen, I tested Johnny, and he here's his report card, and we'll go over it kind of step by step, just like the grades on a child's report card at school. And I'll say, in my opinion, I think it would be best if he waited and did not test for his black belt in December, but to go ahead and wait until April of next year to test. And I feel like in my heart of hearts, if I sent him now, that he wouldn't be ready. And I would much rather send him when I know without a shadow of a doubt that he's going to pass with flying colors. And I think another thing to share with students in this situation, or even a stripe test, is that social proof. And that's either pointing out that, hey, there's been a lot of times where I didn't pass my belt test or tip test when I thought I was going to. And you know what? I was a little bit disappointed, but I worked hard anyway. And look, now I'm a black belt. Or I'll point to other students in class that are really high level black belts, and I'll say, hey, you see Jason over there? Yeah, he didn't pass this test and he didn't pass this test, but he decided to make that choice of not letting that stop him to his goal of getting his black belt and practicing even harder. So again, letting the students know that it's not just them, it happens to, lots of people, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. This is how we grow as martial artists, and this is how we really learn self-discipline. So again, I hope some of those tips helped you on a real practical level the day-to-day of teaching martial arts. I know those conversations aren't always easy, but hopefully if you do them right, it actually builds a stronger relationship with you and the student and the parent, and more trust at the end of the day. So I look forward to your feedback and any ideas that you have, or techniques or strategies that you have in having those conversations. I'd love to hear them. I think our members would love to hear them, and we can work together as a team on this. And don't forget to like the Satori Alliance on Facebook and share this video if it was helpful for you.